Good evening, everyone. Tonight, very special guest, Fabrizio Aiello, most famous for his comic Horace H Hoover, creator of many other comics, and we will perhaps talk about some things he's got coming up. But tonight is a special format. We will be doing a Drawstream. Largely because I know Fabrizio wants to get some stuff done, and I am way behind. So this seemed like the best format. So if you're wondering why you don't see any people, now you know.
Two birds, one stone.
That's right. So how you been?
Good. This is fun. I almost never stream during the weekday, so this really is like it's a rare occurrence.
It's nice, right? Sort of break the mold, get ready for some new adventures, so to speak.
Yeah, like weekends, it's funny because I'll do Sunday afternoon like 3:00, which always sounds like a good idea, but it has got to be the laziest time of the day and the week. Like Sunday at 3,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, this is nap time and I'm gonna go stream.
So I believe you had mentioned once before you are working on Horace issue number 4, which you're hoping to have done sometime this year.
Yeah, definitely. So I am on the last 3 pages for pencils of issue 4. So it's been a long journey, but this is sort of the end of an arc of the past couple of issues. So I had to make sure that I sort of stuck the landing. But I'm really happy with it. So, based on that, inks will probably take a couple of months, colors, letters. So I think middle of summer for issue 4. And then,
nice.
Yeah, and then I will die trying to get issue 5 done by the end of the year. That's my goal.
And issue 5 is where this arc of Horace kind of, you take a break for a while, right?
Yeah, this limited series, I have a couple of different approaches. I have a couple of short stories, I have a longer arc, and then I have a self-contained issue, which is 5. But at the end of that, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I have a couple of stories that I've been thinking about for a couple of years now, and I'm gonna pick one of them and take a little bit of a break. Horace isn't going anywhere, but I think it'll serve Horace in the long run and myself better if I kind of divert my attention a bit.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned on the stream, so we always want to be working on the one thing that we're not. So
yeah, that's kind of my philosophy. It's like I've really been wanting to get maps for the campaign guide that I've been working on, but it's like no, I have to finish writing stuff first, and then I know as soon as I'm actually planning on working on those maps this month, and I know as soon as I start, I'm going to be like, oh man, I really got to write this other chapter. I'm really inspired to write something now.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. These couple of stories that I had in my head, I write down a few notes, and then I very purposefully I try not to sit on them and mull them over, because I know that as soon as I do that, I'm gonna think of some stuff, and that'll really it'll be an impediment to getting Horace H Hoover done. So I have a pretty decent commute. It's 45 minutes to an hour in the morning and on the way back.
Ouch.
Yeah, and this one morning it's like 6 a.m. and out of seemingly the blue, I just got like 4 or 5 scenes of this one story I want to do. I wasn't even thinking about it. It just kind of, how it happens. It just
Mhm.
kind of springs into your head. And I'm like, all right, well, that's like a telltale sign that at least when I'm done with Horace, that I should jump on that. So we'll see.
Um, so you, one thing I didn't realize a while back is that you are actually somewhat of a tabletop role playing gamer.
Yeah. So um, it started well, actually, no, it started before college. My very long story. When I was really young, my oldest brother, who's like 4 or 5 years older than me, he had bought like the very original like D&D box of miniatures. Like there was a little red box.
Oh wow,
It was, I think it was lead, right? Back in the day, it wasn't even pewter yet.
might have been, yeah. Oh well, in the '70s they didn't have safety standards, so yeah, probably it was.
Yeah. So I found that I was really young. I found this box of miniatures, and I would actually draw with them. Um, but they really kind of captured my imagination, and I wasn't exposed to a lot of fantasy. Then the 80s movies came out, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't play D&D until college. Um, I ended up rooming with this dude, and he was a huge D&D guy, like hardcore his whole life. He already had a group that he'd been playing with for 10 years, when he went to
Wow.
college. So he helped, he was a DM and ran me through some stuff, and we did some campaigns. I've never been able to like be a DM. That's just not my forte.
Um,
But yeah, I've always, well, not always, but I would say most of the time been involved in some game or another. Um, and about a year or two ago, we started up a new campaign for Icewind Dale. So that's what we've been playing for the past year.
Very cool. So for you, how much does the artwork affect your perception of the game? I would say.
Oh man, it's huge, huge. I always attribute like my interest in art to a few different places. One is album covers. I've mentioned this before,
Mhm.
like Catholic churches, the kind of
Yeah, yeah.
that sort of artwork. And the other is I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young. The high school kids came to my art class and they all sort of demoed some of their artwork. And this one dude brought a couple of drawings. They were these really beautifully inked, pen and ink, like fantasy art. And it just, like at that moment, I was like, I want to draw. That was the one thing that said, I need to do trolls and I need to do, intricate brickwork and all that kind of stuff. And then the comics kind of came after that. So it was really that fantasy art that like really blew my mind.
Yeah, I find a lot of people sort of fall into it that way. I I well, John's here, so he and I have on occasion talked about there's always some issue of a comic that maybe you've read comics before, or maybe maybe you haven't, maybe it hasn't caught your interest, but there's always one where like you see the comic on the stand or on a shelf in a shop, and like the clouds open and there's a ray of light from heaven, and you hear the angels singing arias, and like it just blows your mind. And
Yeah.
everybody's got that one issue. I think I think it's very similar for fantasy art, especially during like the heyday of the, let's say, late '70s to maybe like 1990 for tabletop role playing games.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. I even love the bad fantasy art. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
it's got its own sort of like fun style to it. So I was just like, give me any and all fantasy art. And then I always talk about, Ken Kelly, famous, fantasy artist doing
Hmm.
Destroyer and Love Gun, which was another sort of entrance into that feel. Um, Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, and even the comic books that I immediately gravitated towards, like Thor is probably, well, actually my first comic was Hulk, but the one particular issue of the Hulk, there was an appearance of the X-Men. So I was like, who is this fantasy looking character Thor, you know? But yeah, the art is it's amazing. I bought the Player's Handbook recently? Well, not recently, but and I don't know how much I actually read the Player's Handbook. You know, it's really just paging through and looking at the art, you know, just to kind of get a feel for it.
Which edition did you get?
5E.
2014 or 2024?
Oh, 2024. I've had it.
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
I just wanted a physical thing to flip through, you know.
Yeah, I have a copy of it around. It was just sitting here right next to my desk. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I got this one. I like this cover the best.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know that one.
It's the same thing. They came out with special covers. Like comic books have to have 80 covers. I guess now tabletop role-playing games also have to have 80 covers.
I didn't know that. That's funny.
But the interior art is, in my opinion, kind of sad. I was very disappointed. I had Richard Witters he was an artist who used to do Magic the Gathering, and then he became the art director for Magic the Gathering. And then he got his chance to do his favorite game of all time, which was Dungeons and Dragons. So he was the art director for the 2014 5e. So it was super interesting to have him on. And, of course he was, I think I had him on before the edition came out last year. And, of course he's not going to bag on his former employee or anything, but, we had some nice conversations about fantasy art, and, it's kind of a shame that he's not there anymore. One thing that we were talking about was, that kind of art style, like the 5e, at least from 2014 digital art style, is so pervasive that if you use AI, it like defaults to that style.
Yeah, that was a big disappointment for me. The very obviously digital painted stuff.
And the thing is, I think it's worse for the 2024 version. The 2014 was actually, well, it was a newer style, but even then things are rendered more realistically. Whereas like with the new handbook, it's almost like they took an impressionistic style. But the problem is it doesn't look finished. It almost looks like an underpainting that they're like, good enough.
Yeah, along the lines, digital painting, first it was let's try to mimic actual oil paints or acrylics or something like that. But over the years, it's its own style. It's really its own thing. You can see it right away, and it just doesn't have the same effect. Like I said, I would rather have like a hand-drawn pen and ink bad old D&D art than the new digital stuff. But I am old, so it's in the title.
I know, and it's kind of a shame because you had now I'm going to forget all their names. I've been looking over a lot of Keith Parkinson work recently, and it's like such a shame that they don't have that depth in in their roster anymore, you know?
Yeah, I do. I follow this one dude. Is it Scott Fisher? Is that his name? Does that sound familiar?
I'm not familiar with him, but maybe.
He does, at least from what I can tell on his Instagram. I never see where the final stuff ends up, but he's still doing like traditional painting. I'm like, yeah, and it's all like he did a big Beholder one, which is amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, but I don't know where they end up. Like, surely he's not. Well, maybe he's doing it for fun, but it's such a huge difference. Again, not to just crap on digital art or anything, but
it is, and since I have a kickstarted campaign out there, I've been keeping tabs on other games that are coming out, and I do see more and more people using just AI art, which seems bad for a couple reasons. First of all, someone can just use your art.
Yeah.
They can just take all your images, since you can't copyright them. And that seems, just from a business point of view, that seems kind of bad. But the other thing to me is sameness. Which is a term that I first heard from that Richard Witters. And that's, all of these projects start looking exactly the same. And that's simply because all the digital art more or less is the same, and it's kind of a shame. Even if you get like stock art, Shutterstock, or there's some guys like what's the guy's name? Richard Dean Spencer, I think. They sell kind of like fantasy clip art that you can use in your projects, but it's still hand drawn, so it still has like a certain flavor to it.
Yeah.
I can understand some people wanting to use the AI art. Like if your ability to draw amounts to stick figures, which mine is like maybe one step above that. But if you're drawing stick figures and all of a sudden you have access to AI art, like that is a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
However,
it's hard to,
they still don't know like what's good art, what would look the best, and why people do certain things. Like why do you need a certain kind of image? So it just, I just think all those people are going to have a really hard time differentiating their books when their art looks exactly the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Like even though, Marvel had a house style, so to speak, it's not like you would confuse artists 90% of the time. Maybe in the 90s you couldn't tell quite, but like in the 80s you could tell a mile away who was who, even if
absolutely.
they were even if they were all aiming at a certain goal. So yeah, even I don't know, like does that hold for writing? Now that I think about it, sometimes I'm like, oh, I would rather have bad original art than good AI art. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think AI works well writing wise. Like if you need like, hey, is this business letter formatted correctly? Does this look like something a lawyer might write as a response to something?
Yeah.
I think it works well there, but the problem is the flavors and even inconsistency in people's artwork. A lot of that is what makes it look special. And I think that's once you start to strip that out, you really have problems.
Yeah, like all of the times that you have to draw, you come up with shorthand, and then that shorthand really just becomes your language. And Yeah, that's how we identify stuff. I can tell a Gil Kane drawing just by the kneecaps. And it's like it gets that specific sometimes.
That's
Nobody.
that's what Jack Kirby says. So John's long box says, "Man, you two need to come over and play RPGs." I feel like sometimes, John really, really, really wants people to come over. I've heard him say that to a lot of guests, and I think he believes it for every single one. And like, I could see him wanting to have like 30 people in his basement.
That would be awesome.
Playing some game.
Yeah, I would not say no.
Definitely.
As soon as Horace H Hoover is done, my life will open up again, and I can do fun things. Not to say this isn't fun, but.
And speaking of things that are taking over your life, weren't you talking about doing a fantasy book next?
No. Oh, well, I had two ideas that have been kind of rolling around. One is like a dark fantasy, yeah. And then one is man, I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, it's probably as close as I'll get to like superhero, but it's not very. Yeah, it's maybe more military than superhero.
Oh, okay.
The thing is, I kept on thinking about the dark fantasy because it's a graphic novel because it has a distinct ending to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, after doing a 5-issue miniseries that kind of, took a long time, I don't know if I want to do that. So this other story, I can definitely do an episodic story, keep it to 26 pages or whatever, 30 pages. And it'd be it'll hit the sweet spot for me. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do next. But man, the dark fantasy, I'm really excited about it. It's definitely, I'm always sort of loath to say horror because I don't know, like other people's expectation of horror sometimes is a little more horrific than mine. So we'll say horror elements, like
okay,
supernatural stuff, vampires, that kind of thing. But yeah, as far as the premise or anything, I don't know if I really want to get into it now just because it's so far away. But we'll say monster honey with some family drama. That's pretty vague, right?
Sounds interesting though.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to like amp up the drama. So there's definitely a lot of that. Between a sort of a royal family and the offspring and the ancestors and stuff like that. So yeah, that'll be down the road. At this point, I really have to think in terms of what will I be writing in the retirement home? So, I got to think, all right, if I do this other book now, when I hit the retirement home, I can start on my graphic novel or something.
Is retirement coming up anytime soon?
No. I just meant that it takes me that long to do something.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That I don't want to be that guy in the retirement home that you don't want to get next to because he's going to tell you about this guy who wears a vacuum cleaner on his head. And then the other people in the retirement home like complain to the orderlies about you, and then then you're in a big mess.
But I bet you would get the best meds if you did that.
That's a good point. You just got to keep it right under the wire of like crazy person to eccentric.
John says, I say yes to that. My wife, she is not so happy about the idea.
Oh, I was going to ask you this, and I know I
Mhm.
mentioned it in streams or whatever. Do you know Dave Stewart? Do you follow him at all?
Um,
He has a YouTube channel. He's on Twitter. He's a fantasy writer, but he has a lot of really good videos on, I mean, writing, fantasy, music, pop culture, all that kind of stuff. And I've been following him for years, and I actually finally bought one of his books, and it's good. It's
yeah.
Yeah, it's good. He does live writes, which I thought was really interesting. So he will write the entire novel during a stream. Well, multiple streams over the course of months, but I've never seen anybody do that before, and I thought it was a pretty cool idea.
That's cool. I don't know if I could do live write. Like I'm so schizophrenic when I'm actually writing something. Like I used to live in Los Angeles, and we had this orange tree out in the backyard. And it's like, if I could sit there in perfect peace under the orange tree with my headphones on, listening to lo-fi hip hop or something, then I could write. But I don't know, drawing, I can talk to you. I can sort of, monitor the chat. I can do like a bunch of different things, and it's not that bad. But writing, man, if I get disturbed at all, there goes today's work.
Yeah, I'm probably the same way. I've written a couple short stories, but I need to be, like you said, undisturbed. Like, it's me, some headphones, and I need to be focused, but I can't be in the middle of, I can't be on the bus. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I bet I could do it on the bus or something like that, but maybe not on stream with, talking to people on chat.
Yeah, so that's my hat's off to that guy if he can actually make that work.
Yeah, you should definitely check him out at least. Interesting stuff.
What was his name again?
David Stewart.
David Stewart. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if anyone can tell, the quality of inking in one of these images is certainly a lot better than the other. So, who would you say your main inspirations are to get your inks?
I kind of have a couple of different modes. So if I'm doing something like this, I have sort of books of fancy classical, from Doré to, Albrecht Dürer or something like that. So if I'm doing this kind of stuff, I kind of like to flip through those. But if we're talking comic books, inks, huh? So I think it's tough because sometimes some of my favorite artists had some terrible inkers. And I was just thinking about this the other day. Like if we had, because everybody inked John Buscema at some point in time, like everybody was just slapping their inks on his stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it just wasn't great. I mean, it's still John, and underneath would be this incredible illustration, but the inks are just pretty subpar. But then you got Dan Green and Al Milgrom, and they are so good it hurts. I would say Dan Green. If I had to pick an inker, honestly, that not that I try to mimic in any way, that is probably closest to what I would like to do, it's probably Dan Green.
That's an interesting choice, because Dan Green has, he really changed his style a lot over the years. And the artist I'm thinking of him working with is Mark Silvestri. Because Mark Silvestri's first issue on the X-Men was Uncanny X-Men 218. If you look at that compared to when he leaves in 260 something, 61 or 65, like it's just night and day. And then you go over to the Wolverine series. It's he starts getting very Mike Mignola-ish.
Yeah, there's a specific thing he does. Maybe you know what? Maybe I'll even grab it. 1 second. So I've been buying these black and whites because I got sick and tired of like pulling out old comics. I've never shown my comic collection, but basically it's a closet with short boxes stacked so high. If I need to pull comics out, it's literally a nightmare. But there's something that he does really specifically, which is this right here. And like he does this brush and then he does these ticks, really quick, like little ticks with a brush. And he does that everywhere. It's probably the most, like the one aspect of his stuff that you can really just pick out anywhere. But it's, right there. It's just this quick brush and these ticks. It's not some like overly labored Scott Williams stuff. It's not, but it has like a lot of energy. And that's the kicker for me is the energy. Like him, wait, did he ink this one? Yeah, he inks the Buscema one, but it doesn't feel like Dan Green to some degree. But yeah,
Dan Green is kind of a chameleon.
But like that kind of stuff, that's like if I could do this right here, that I would be happy. I know. I mean, that's a high bar, but
it's interesting. I don't know where I found it, but somewhere I found the pencils for a few of those issues. And when you see how loosely, it would look like this drawing I have here is like how detailed Mark Silvestri would draw, which is to say, not very at all. Really? And then you get these incredibly complex images. It's like, oh my God, Dan Green was really the hero of that run. And I mean, I love Mark, but after seeing that, and it does make sense. The guy was doing 44 pages in a month. He was doing 2 issues a month. And it's like, oh, okay, now I see how he could do that.
Yeah, I would love to track down some of those pencils. And I think I've heard somebody else say that before, that, the stuff that Silvestri did was so loose, and Dan Green, like you said, was the hero of that stuff. Man, like that, it's loose, but it's controlled and it's descriptive, and it doesn't get wonky like a lot of inkers can go.
Well, that's the thing. If you look back on those, if my long box were in better shape, I'd pull some issues out. But if you look back on that stuff, Mark's work was so much more dynamic than, I mean, maybe Barry Windsor Smith, and Art Adams would have been comparable. But if you look at like John Romita Jr. and some of the other people they had doing X-Men, like in the late 180s to early 200s, they were 50 times stiffer and more posy, and it was up to Mark sort of to make everything really move. But then I've got his latest, the Batman book, which I haven't really had time to delve into, but it's really interesting to see. Mark went through that kind of sort of unfortunate phase when he joined Image, where he was sharing a studio with Jim Lee, and so then it became like a competition who could like outdo each other, which sounds cool, except for Mark just went for, he was already famous for himbos with that Inferno run, but it just got to be like overly muscled and everything, whereas he had characters that he could make normal sized people look heroic, if you take my meaning. You didn't need muscles on top of muscles. But now we can take a look at Mark and see what he's like with different inkers. And it's an interesting question to me, is like, are those inkers having to deal with the same stuff that Dan Green did?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I mean, what was I was just reading something recently. What the heck was it? I'm totally blanking. Oh yeah, I was just looking at the John Burns Elsewhere stuff, and I had heard about it. I never read it though. It was like, oh, that looks cool, and then I just kind of moved on. But I never actually tracked down the issues or like the full issues and pages and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm looking at it, and then I'm thinking, yeah, this is still really good. Now, I have to admit, I mean, John Byrne is great, but he's not my favorite artist.
I feel you.
But he was pretty old when he did these pages, and it's like he didn't lose anything. And I feel like a lot of other artists, they really degrade as they get older. And for a while, I'm like, oh crap, is this what is inevitable, for me? But I really don't think so. Between him and, Will Eisner doing The Contract of God, and even John Buscema, up until it was it late 70s or mid 70s? He was doing work, and it looked great.
I mean, it's a real interesting question. I can see a lot of them really having gotten burned out. And let's be honest, the comic industry is like, I don't know, almost as sleazy as the adult industry when you get into like contracts and how they treat people. So it would not surprise me if they, people are just kind of phoning it in. And I think too, I think part of it's the time. Like, I can see now people having built up a certain fan following, and with social media, like, you can keep that fan following for the rest of your life should you choose to do so. Whereas like they were kind of at the mercy of like, I hope to God somebody hires me. I hope they let me into Artist Alley this year so I could sell some commissions.
Jeez.
And even in the 70s and I guess the early 80s, there wasn't that strong of a comic. Comics didn't really have the same level of nostalgia yet,
Yeah.
Whereas like, shit, if I could get Mark Silvestri to do, even just an image that I would hang up, in my office, like,
yeah,
I would totally pay for that if I had, like $1 billion. But
I guess the Silvestri thing is interesting, especially that Deadly Duo, because that I don't know, that's the first thing he did in a long time, as far as I know.
Years and years.
Yeah, and it's still really good. It's not his old stuff. It's different, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it's actually, I mean, my favorite will always be his runs on Uncanny X-Men and Wolverine. Yeah. Part of that is the nostalgia of the time, just where I was. Sort of like, how people, your music taste sort of stops at high school.
Yeah. I think about that a lot. And I think it's impossible to deny it has a pretty big impact. But then, I think there is a way to try to like be objective about it, and and I think if we're being objective, Mark Silvestri definitely. I mean, he was a good artist and one of the best, to be honest. I think we were at a certain age, like you said, at that time, and we'll always have like a connection to it. But I still think he's one of the best.
He is definitely a guy who is not as well remembered as I think he should be. Could Jim Lee have taken X-Men and had the #1 selling issue? Could he have had that run that he did without Mark to set it up? Because when Mark was doing his thing, that's when X-Men was selling, between 100 and 300,000 issues per, well, not even per month, sometimes twice a month.
Yeah, twice a month. When I remember that, I'm like, holy, that was insane. It still blows my mind. I think McFarlane did that with Spider-Man for a bit, but I don't know how long that lasted.
Yeah, well, and they were making good money on it too, because back then was when you could actually get royalties on things. Like, the current crop of artists, their stuff, I think you have to sell 40,000 issues to start getting royalties. And
Wow.
and if a book sells 20,000, people are amazed.
Yeah.
So back then, if you sold 200,000, like, you were rolling in the dough.
Yeah. There are many times where I wish that we were all sort of in that era, like the opportunities just seemed, I don't know, everything was so exciting, and the potential, like going to a convention back then, it just felt like, I don't know, it was different. It just felt like anybody could blow up at any time. It definitely doesn't feel like that way now.
But no, I mean, well, part of it is it became too corporatized, and it's never a good idea to have a corporation tell you what's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I can understand to an extent, they have to look after the bottom line, right? Like, I don't begrudge Marvel and DC, or if we're talking about gaming, Wizards of the Coast, or anybody like that, I don't begrudge them having to make money on their products, but once the coolness is directed by marketers and project directors who have no experience with whatever it is they're trying to sell,
Always.
it just becomes bad, and the whole industry is going to sink.
It's funny, and maybe I'm delusional, and I was delusional for sure, but I went to this convention, I had a table, and this was like 1999, something like that. I was right out of college, and me and a friend, we did a short story. We just kind of did a zine kind of thing, stapled it together, got a table, and it didn't do great, obviously. We got some feedback, and me and him had a falling out, and it just kind of went away.
That sucks.
And when I started doing Horace H Hoover, it was kind of like in my head, I was just going to be picking up right where I left off. You know what I mean? Like, it would feel the same. Like the industry and everything about it would still feel the same like it did in 1990. Even though I knew it changed logically, I was paying attention to comics in my head. I'm like, no, I'll be picking up right where I left off. No.
No, we've entered the era of crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of art books, I just picked up. This guy just came in today.
I have that. Yep.
You do?
Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah. It's nice. I mean, I think personally, we are going to start seeing a return to more detailed classical style illustration. And
Yeah.
I think eventually, not anytime soon, eventually, if there is a resurgence in at least American comics, we're going to start seeing more things like this. Just because, you know, the comic industry is so bad. Like, I don't blame people for not buying half the crap that Marvel and DC put out.
Yeah. Yeah, I follow some people. Speaking of fantasy art, there's some fantasy artists that I follow. They do pen and inks, and every time I see them, there's a part of me, I'm not gonna lie, that's like, you know what? Stop doing comics and just do pen and ink illustrations. Because that's kind of where I started. Like I said, that was my, like, ever since I was a little kid, that's really what got me into art. And there are a lot of times where I'm like, you know what, just go back to illustration and try to do something like that. Here's the thing. Is there any more of a market for that than comics? I'll be honest, I have no idea. Because
games, you know, I think that, well, if you look at what happened to a lot of the people who were in comics, like what's his name, Trent Kanuga, I think is how he pronounces it. You know, he was doing comics. He was doing some stuff with Image, but working on video games. I think he was working for Blizzard. I think they just pay a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
You know, so what are you gonna do? So we've got Kennick saying some artists develop a preferred medium: charcoal versus graphic pencils versus color pencils versus paint. So what are your preferred mediums?
I used to do charcoal a lot for many, many years. That was my medium of choice. That was like my go-to. I went through like eras, much like Taylor Swift. I
hope not like Taylor Swift.
I get super focused on one thing, much like, and I know there's people out there like that. You could focus on one kind of music and you just deep dive into that thing, like some historical topic or something. And for me, that's like art. I'll do charcoal, and that's the only thing I'll do for years, and then I'll switch to graphite, and then I'll do that. So I feel like I've definitely dabbled in a lot, and I've also done like deep dives. But charcoal, just regular graphite, like detailed stuff like that, and watercolor. I just bought a bunch of oil paints, and I'm setting up a studio to do sort of very traditional fine art oil painting stuff, but I got to wait to dig into that.
That's cool. You know what is something that is, you're gonna think it's really strange, is I don't think I have ever once had an art class, and you're talking to a guy with a degree in graphic design, where somebody has shown me how to use the tools. Like, I've taken water color classes, and like, it was just like, oh, here, go paint this. Here's like a fruit bowl. Go practice with the fruit bowl. Here's this and that. But no one has ever shown me like, oh, here's the technique for like how you would get this effect or that effect. And as a result, there are so many methods like I just conceptually can't understand. Like, I can't do them at all.
You can't just pick that. Like, you need to be taught so many techniques, whether it's oil painting or especially watercolor, because that can go awry pretty easily. There's no erasing, stuff like that is brutal.
Yeah, so it's funny. Like I'm pretty decent with markers and colored pencils, because for somehow like my brain can sort of intuitively figure out how those work together. But watercolor, forget it. Oil paints, forget it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the oil painting stuff. I don't know. I think we all have like a natural medium, kind of like what somebody was saying, because we all either naturally are very tight and technical artists or very loose and expressive, and there's definitely mediums that reflect that and that just work with you as opposed to working against you. Like if you're a really super tight technical artist, you can do watercolor. It's just going to be a lot more difficult, because the element of water just automatically adds some more difficulty into it. But yeah, I mean, pen and ink is going to be where you're going to excel, and then graphite, and then charcoal from there.
So who are you reading these days?
I'm actually reading that David Stewart book, which is good. I really like it. A note about that is he uses, I don't want to call them run-on sentences, but he uses a lot of commas in his sentences. And the thing I find interesting about that is that I have an editor that edits my stuff, and she would never let me get away with like the amount of commas that David Stewart uses. And I'm like, I think it's because she's a younger girl, and I really think it's a sort of a younger person or view of literature where you can't have these long, not even like overly flowery, just, a couple of commas, that's all. Yeah.
Have you ever tried to read documents from like the 1700s? Like, I don't know if you ever try to read stuff written by like speeches by the founding fathers and stuff like that. Have you ever tried?
Yeah, I mean, I've read some. Usually it's philosophy, so like Edmund Burke or people like that.
Well, because that's how people used to write. Like, it would be like one sentence could go on for like 10 lines of text.
Yes. Yeah, I just read A Christmas Carol last year. And Dickens was talking about, those are legitimately run-on sentences. They go on forever. And you have to pick up and like, wait, where did I leave? Like, it's almost like a little mini story in each sentence. So I'm reading him, and I'm just, I got my comic book to read list. I just finished Wolf and Batsy 13, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, nice.
It's one of my favorites so far. Brian just has a knack for like these classic horror settings. Everything about it feels just original and cool. I just bought, I don't want to repeat myself, but I just bought a G.I. Joe compendium for like 1,000 pages.
Oh, nice.
And it was like $35 or something. So I'm going to set aside a weekend to like really dig into that. So that's definitely that's coming up.
G.I. Joe was amazing. It's something that time has forgotten.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I listen to a lot of like real military stuff. So I follow a lot of like, Delta Force guys and SEALs. They're all over the place, but it's always been an interest of mine. Like my family is, I don't want to say we're a military family, but my dad was in the reserves. My brother was in the Army. My other brother was in the reserves. So there's enough of us where it feels not so foreign. And I like that kind of stuff. I've always have. I do like firearms and whatnot. and I put in GI Joe, like, I don't know, it was a month or so ago, and there really hasn't been like an analog or like nobody's tried to rip it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like it was a thing, and it was great, and the character design and everything was great, but nobody's tried to kind of go in and do their version, at least that I know of.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing. I mean, I think the early 2000s would have been a great time for it. Like sort of war on terror, because Cobra technically was a terrorist organization. Like that would have been the time to bring it back. And I don't know why Hasbro couldn't do it at that time. I mean, it could be that it was too politically incorrect. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very enamored by like character design that stuck with me all years later. So whenever whether it's Transformers or Thundercats, whatever cartoon show, whatever it is, we always had our favorites. And it's funny, even He-Man, if you sort of squint and you're like, okay, let's look at the character's design for what it was, nostalgia aside, everything aside. Is the character design interesting and original and clever and cool? And it kind of is. Something as ludicrous as some He-Man characters, but you look at the designs and they're top notch. So even at its most basic, all of those cartoons and shows or whatever, just, I don't know who, the design sense at that time was just, it couldn't be beat. Battle of the Planets, some of my favorite costume design of all time.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned this. Well, first I'll just say that a lot of people forget that in the 80s, Transformers and G.I. Joe were two of the best-selling comics at that time. So there was a lot of money pumped into them. And you had a certain fortunate sense for who the people working on them were. There was a lot of Larry Hama, who was a Vietnam veteran. So he kind of had this military knowledge to make it kid-friendly, I guess you could say, but also kind of real.
Yeah. There's just something about it that is, again, like all those other things, like you said, kid-friendly, but you could be older and still get something out of it.
Yeah. But the other thing I was going to say is, right now, Japan is, even though manga is kind of riding high, if you go back and you look at stuff from, the 70s through the very early 90s, Japan cannot produce that quality of work anymore. There's one thing, like the colors. If you go back and you like the colors in Akira and all those kind of movies were fantastic, but they were all mixed by one guy. That guy, I believe he died. And so, you can never make another 80s looking, color-wise, 80s looking series or movie like that. And just like the amount of sort of craziness and even the violence had like a certain level of realness to it, that I've been watching some of the newer anime shows that end up on Netflix and stuff, and most of them, there's plenty of violence, but it's all like sort of dumbed down, so to speak.
Yeah, it does concern me that we just end up losing certain skill sets, and it could be stop motion stuff, whatever it is, like those traditional skills. and then it would be really tough to make it financially feasible for people to go back and learn that. Once cell animation is dead officially,
Yeah.
or something like that, whatever. And we lose that skill, to bring it back from the grave.
We are kind of there. I mean, the last large-scale 2D animated movie in the US, I believe, was The Princess and the Frog by Disney.
Huh.
I mean, there's plenty of computer animated movies that look like they are, hand-drawn, kind of, sort of. But, they kind of went and got rid of everyone who knew how to do it, basically.
Yeah, hopefully it just goes into just a niche, highly sought after skill set. Brian's an animator. I don't really know anything about animation. There's actually not a surprising, but there's a fair amount of animators that do comics, and I know.
Yep.
I don't know anything about the industry at all.
But the question is, what are they animating in? I know Toon Boom Studio is like a big program, and part of the problem with, to my mind, well, I shouldn't say problem. I mean, it makes it a lot easier for a smaller crew of animators to do work. Like not everyone can own North Korean slaves to do all the in-betweens on your on your projects.
If only.
Well, you do know that there were some shows that got caught doing that, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. And a lot of US animators were pissed because, like, probably not best to give them the work.
Wow, yeah, I didn't know that.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the whole thing shapes up eventually.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, I missed this. John said my favorite Eisner is a Life Force. I don't know that one. Do you know?
Yeah, I haven't read that one either.
I'll have to check it out.
I don't know if John's still here or not. But I've never really read a lot of Will Eisner. Not that I don't want to, but I just never. I think when I was in the comic shops, when I was going to them regularly, like, he just wasn't popular at that time. Or I think in some ways there's like a kind of been a little bit of a renaissance of his work, in the sense that, like, now he's really more publicly recognized as, like a master of the craft. Whereas when I was there in the 80s and early 90s, not that he wasn't recognized, but he just kind of was forgotten.
Yeah, the same. Like, I gotta think about this, but the first book I ever got on comics was Will Eisner's book. So it was it was before Marvel Way. It was before, I'm blanking on that dude's name. Not Making Comics. Scott McCloud stuff. So the first thing I ever read about comics was Will Eisner's book, and it kind of blew my mind. And then after that, I sort of started like looking for Eisner stuff. But you're right. It wasn't like, hey, look, it's X-Force and Will Eisner right next to it. It was it just wasn't around.
Well, I mean, he was like this Franklin Booth book. He was sort of in like, hey, this is a serious artist, even though it's comic book stuff. Like now Franklin Booth. Like, he's not just an advertisement guy. He's actually a master.
Yeah, that's funny. That's an amazing book. Yeah, every time I see those really detailed penning stuff, it just I get why Bernie Wrightson's like, you know what, I'm gonna do this amazing Frankenstein thing as like my magnum opus or something.
Yeah, and you know, the interesting thing that blows me away about like Booth is that, you know, this was kind of like the popular new thing at the time, because technology for making pen nibs was not that old when he was doing his stuff. So like, you know, people in the late 1800s, early 1900s would see his stuff and be like, wow, this is the cool new thing.
That's
Technology and society and electricity brings us.
They're like, isn't that cheating? Using a nib instead of a
Instead
feather?
of carving your own quill from a duck? Yeah.
And you have to kill the duck, and you have to hunt, and you have to make the duck call, and you have to, you know, do your own gunpowder.
I'm sure that there were people complaining about that.
Yeah.
I had this professor in college. He was a cool dude. He wrote sort of like philosophy of technology books. But he was telling us one time about his father. He was an opera singer, and he absolutely hated the microphone.
Wow.
And his problem with it was, like, when you were a singer before, you had to train your voice to be able to project all the way to the back of a theater. And with a microphone, you would be a crooner. And crooner was really a put down at the time. Like, those fuckers, you can't hear them 4 rows back.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, as much as we complain about AI art.
Yeah. I was talking about really getting into like a topic or a medium. So whenever I got into oils in school, it's like this weird progression for me. Okay, I'm going to learn how to oil paint. Cool. I got to stretch my own canvases. Not a problem. Not a big deal. Can I make my stretchers? Yeah, sure. I could do that. Like, and then I got to the point where, you know what, I can make my own paints. It's actually, you buy the pigment and you get the meat, and I remember my painting teacher's like, dude, just chill. You know what I mean? Why don't you get some paintings under your belt? And after like 10 years, if you really feel like you need to do your own paints, then do that. I'm like, all right.
That's why 4 or 5 months later, I still don't have a kitchen.
Are you like, making cabinets or something? Or
yeah, exactly. It's like, well, do that. Okay, well, I can do part of this electrical wiring. No problem. You know, I'll do the cabinets. That'll be easy. Oh, you know, I need to take out the floor while I'm here.
Yeah.
God bless my wife for putting up with my nonsense.
A Life Force is a sequel to A Contract with God. I didn't know that. I have to get that. Contract with God is so good. It's actually, speaking of inking, like his use of, and I'm assuming it's a pen. I can't imagine it's a brush, but I don't have any verification if it's a brush or a pen. Is so smooth and just, it's like a beautiful line. Nothing like the lines I'm putting down here.
Well, you're doing better than me, so.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, so what is this character that you're doing?
This is the Rat King. So for anyone who backed the Empire of the Undying Sun with the extra supplementary games that come with it, I had one level that was 12 modules. That's what I'm looking for. 12 supplementary modules that come with, that are like set in the world, but they're not necessarily a part of the campaign guide. So I had a buddy of mine by the name of Bill Sylvie. He used to work writing modules for Gary Gygax, and I got him to write 3 modules for me. So the first one's been out for a little while, Fairy Hill. The second one is going to be this one, which is The Rat King.
That's cool.
Which is you find yourself in a warehouse full of were-rats, and
I love that.
You have to kind of figure out what's what. And then, yep.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then there's another one in the series which hopefully I will have edited by the end of this month or very early April, called The Willow Sisters.
Cool. And who, like, for your modules, do you have art for the modules? I actually have no idea. Or is that just a written? Do you have maps or?
Just me.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I mean, that's a cool drawing.
Oh, thank you. The modules themselves they're meant to be like kind of like one shots, like something you could play for 3 to 6 hours. They're not big and all inclusive like the campaign guide or anything like that.
Right.
And I mean, technically anybody could take one of these modules and plop it into their own campaign setting. So that's kind of where it is. They're meant to I know you backed the campaign guide. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not. But the part of it is there are gaps. So like the adventures in chapter 2 take place 2 or 3 months after chapter 1. So depending on your players, you could say like when I'm doing my test groups, I just say, okay, what do you do for 2 months? And then they give me a description, and we figure that out. But you can also have other adventures during that time, and these at least these first 3 are meant to sort of fill in that gap time.
Gotcha.
So they are semi-canonical in the sense that if you want them to happen in your campaign, they can happen, and if you don't, then they don't have to happen.
Yeah, I've never. The stuff that I do buy, I usually hand to my friend who's the DM, and I'm like, "Let's play this. This looks cool," and then he does all of the dirty work, so to speak.
Well, I have. I should be dropping another set of chapters by this weekend. I just finished laying out chapter. So I got 2, 3, and there is a mechanic for. One thing I always thought was lame in Dungeons and Dragons was the astral realm, because it didn't really do anything. So I changed that to be the dream realm, which functions a lot more like Chris Claremont's ideal of the astral plane in X-Men comics. So like it's purely mental, and you can do things in there that you can't normally do in real life. because it's Dream and it all follows Dream
Yeah.
logic. So
That's
the
cool.
rule sets for that are in there.
What are we listening to? Is this just
So this is Epidemic Sound. I don't know if you've heard of them. It is a website that has royalty-free music. And it's pretty cool because you can download the individual instruments or you can download the full mixed track. And they have really good stuff in different genres. But I was looking for something to do like, Drawstreams are a little dry if it's just me talking, like you always have music in yours. And I remembered you were a jazz guy. So I just downloaded a bunch of I think it was under the cool jazz heading.
Yep. Cool jazz, West Coast jazz is definitely my favorite.
But I mean, they have actual nice stuff. If you're the kind of person who would pay for a Spotify account, like if you find value in that, Epidemic Sound might actually be worth your while because they do have real artists on there. The nice thing about this is you can actually use it on your shows.
Yeah, because right now I got the same 5 soundtracks that I play over and over again. I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, I try to mix it up a little bit. I haven't been doing nearly enough art streams, but once I get this month's, or I should say it's still technically for February, but once I get that month's chapters uploaded, next month is going to be less chapters, but the maps. I haven't had time to do all the maps for the beginning stuff, so I need to really kind of get that together.
I just love the idea of doing maps. It just seems like a fun technical thing.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. It's almost meditative.
Yeah. I remember this was in college, and in the one D&D group, and this is so long. This is in college, but there was a boat. I think it was a flying boat, and it was ours. So I'm like, okay, I love this. So I ended up painting, like on illustration board, like the boat top. It was just a fun thing to do. Well, barrels, and you got the wood, you got the grain of the wood, and fun stuff.
Oh, well, I was looking for my readers for like an hour before the stream started, and I just found them right next to me on my desk.
If only you had your readers to
where help me look
to find your readers. I don't have glasses, and I probably need them, but I have this idea that if I get glasses, my eyes will get lazy, like it's eye welfare, and they won't. They'll get hooked on the glasses, and then they'll never get off.
I am past that point. I had passed that point long ago. And it's worse too because not only do I have glasses, but I need more light. I'm at the point where like I can't read menus in restaurants anymore. And it sucked. I was playing D&D at a friend's place, and they're a little bit younger than I am, so they have like one floor lamp for an entire living room with like a normal 120 watt equivalent bulb. And I was like, mother effer, I can't read my notes. What's going on? And then that's when I started using like D&D Beyond and different online services to keep track of my character stats.
Funny.
It's sad.
Yeah, I think you had asked what our D&D groups do, and I posted Tailspire and a few other things. Yeah, and it's like the combination of a D&D Beyond or a Tailspire or like a digital repository, but still have physical dice to roll. Like, to me, that's the best version of it, because I don't want to roll digital dice,
No, I'm with you. I mean, I'll do it, but it's not nearly as satisfying. One thing I will say though is it does alter the way that I would play a game. In the campaign guide, when you find it, no big secrets, but there's times when I play around with initiative and rolling for initiative. But you can't do that too much, because on if you're on a computer, if you're using like Roll20 or something, it's very easy to just hit the initiative button like every round, right? So you could have a lot of variable initiative. But like if you have to re-roll every round physically, like the DM is gonna strangle me, because it's such a pain.
I get, that makes sense. Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
You got a party of 6 and you're fighting like 12 enemies. Like, ugh. I'm like, okay, who had what? Who's first? Let me rearrange these cards. It's just bad. So for anyone who's watching on X, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't get to see you in the chat. I can see you here, but we've got a lively chat going, discussions with us amongst themselves. So if you're interested and you're on X, why don't you stop over YouTube and subscribe to the channel. It's at Yang Yan Zhao 4. And if you hate YouTube, that's cool. You can go over to Rumble. I am Yang Yan Zhao over there. And apparently I am actually streaming on Rumble. Who knew? Just a little advertisement for myself. And go check out Fabrizio's channel. What's your YouTube channel?
At Unhallowed Art? No, at Fabrizio Aiello, I think. One of those. I should know this. I changed the name. I think it's at Fabrizio Aiello.
So John says here, I use the dream plane called the imagination. The astral plane is for me the same as outer space, but in another dimension. It separates multiverse. Yeah, that's I don't want to give too much away. I had similar thoughts to that. Traditionally in Dungeons and Dragons, the astral plane is just like another place you go that has a lot of clouds everywhere. So it's kind of boring, in my opinion. It's
just a place with chemtrails.
Yeah, basically. Chemtrails you walk on. You know what's scary about chemtrails? Is it seems like they're true. Like, the conspiracy theorists win again. It's like, God damn it. Can't you guys be wrong about something?
I'm trying to think if I saw anything recently that was even worth discussing.
The new Daredevil came out last week.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that. Have you?
Yeah, I watched. They had 2 episodes out last week, and there's supposed to be another one out today, which I have not seen. I liked it. So the interesting thing about Daredevil to me is like it was the 2015 Netflix show was absolutely fantastic. There is absolute, it was great. It's what you wanted to see in terms of like a little bit more gritty street level superhero movies, right? It was really nice, really well done. However, I rewatched it like right before it went off Netflix, and I kind of forgot like how much fluff was in there. There was like a lot of we have to talk, and then they're like talking about their feelings or whatever in restaurants and stuff, and it's like, ugh. So the thing is, there's still some of that. Like I saw people complaining. There's one scene where the Kingpin goes to couples therapy, which, like, come on,
That's interesting.
But it does have a bunch of action. It does feel in many ways very similar to the Netflix the Netflix show. So I'm gonna keep watching. I think it was
That's cool.
It was nice. It's not 2015. It's not all the same creators. I can't expect it to be. I'm not expecting the hallway and the stairway and the prison break, but we can dream.
Yeah, I actually never saw the original series. I was planned on it. I just never got around to it. Yeah,
worth a watch in my opinion. But like as those shows went on, like I know this is going to sound terrible and someone will clip it, but I think that a lot of them were written by women. And you could tell that, especially with the Iron Fist series. So for anyone who doesn't know, Iron Fist is supposed to be the greatest kung fu expert in the Marvel universe. And he has like a fist that can basically punch through anything in the heart of a dragon. Him, like, he and his girlfriend Colleen Wing invite their biggest enemy over for a poorly cooked spaghetti dinner.
What?
Yes, exactly. What?
Wow.
And this is the problem. Like, how do you not have that show be like some sort of martial arts extravaganza?
Yeah, that hurts.
And it's, I don't know. It's like Leslie Nielsen, right?
Yeah.
So he used to be a serious actor before he got into Police Story and Airplane and those kind of movies. So it's like if you see one of his older movies on TV and you sit there and like you're waiting for the jokes, and then it takes you like 30 minutes to realize they're not coming because it's not one of those movies. That's like what watching Iron Fist is. Like, they conveniently forget powers he has. Like in the very first episode, he jumps like 3 stories onto a fire escape, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. And then he never does anything like that again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it sounds about right. I mean, after I guess Endgame, I think I've only saw 1 or 2 things after that. I did watch WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another show. I think I had like not Captain America or the Falcon, whatever that was.
Oof, that was bad.
That was on in the background. Yeah, that was pretty terrible. And then after that, I was like, all right, I'm kind of done. But I always meant to at least it's one thing if you're in a theater and you paid and you have to sit and watch something you hate, but if I'm drawing on the couch, put something on in the background, it's a pretty low bar.
Yeah. I would recommend that original Netflix run of Daredevil. I think all 3 seasons were pretty decent. Jessica Jones season 1 was really good, and like the first half of Luke Cage. But it's just me. Iron Fist you could skip. I like the Defenders, but apparently like I was the only one.
Yeah, I don't even have Disney, so I can't even see a lot of stuff that even if I wanted to.
Well, there's always could always go on a pirate cruise, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that is true.
I am waiting for the streaming wars to end, and a good number of these outlets to like flame out.
Yeah. It's obnoxious. It really is.
Especially since a lot of them, Amazon Prime and Netflix, they have commercials now.
I know. Don't remind me.
But I mean, it's interesting because it's also at the point where I have Netflix because I get it free with T-Mobile. If I didn't, I would have canceled it.
Yeah, I get HBO free with my phone.
Really?
Yeah, it has ads though, so it's that can definitely ruin an experience depending on what you're watching.
Yeah.
I was watching Black Hawk Down, and it's a pretty intense movie. Lots of terrible things are happening in it, and then it just cuts to the goofiest Liberty Mutual commercial or something, and it's like,
I've been getting that emu.
Yes. All right, I think I actually got to get going.
Yeah, we've been going on a while. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Anytime, seriously, let me know.
Yeah, definitely.
This is fun.
I think I will be doing a lot of art streams, sort of middle of the month through April, but definitely. Oh, and I just wanted to, I think John is probably out of here, but for anyone who's interested, John's Long Box will be launching Heroic Tales 2 on April 4. So wow. I'm sure I'll get him back to talk about some things before that happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's nice whenever, because it wasn't that long ago that he did issue 1, so not having like a huge gap between issues is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Did you read issue 1?
Yeah, it was great. I had Horace H Hoover was in there. He wasn't part of the comic, but he was in there, which was an honor. Honestly, I thought it was so much fun to have something like that in there. Yeah, I'm excited.
I told John last time he was on, like I was so happy that it was actually good. I would have felt so bad not being able to talk about it, like just changing the subject or something. But Heroic Tales, like I hate most modern superhero books like The Boys and Invincible, but Heroic Tales is actually a good read.
Yep.
So
yeah, I'm excited. I know a lot of other stuff going on, which gives me a little more insight, but yeah, I'm excited.
Nice. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for coming, and I will be back next week, probably with some guests. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But for everyone tonight, we are signing out. So I will see y'all later.